Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is Nicole and I like to do fashion DIYs. And in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you how I made this little quarter zip crop sweater. So winter is coming, and personally for me, I can't have too many sweaters, so I naturally have to make some more. And I decided to make this crop little half zip. I guess it's technically a quarter zip after doing some research, which also has pockets. This is my sample, so the bottom of this looks a little funky, but the one that I'm making today for the tutorial won't look like that. If you're interested in purchasing this pattern, I will have my Etsy shop linked down below. And although this is advertised as a cropped sweater, the pattern actually will have adjustment lines, so if you need to make the torso longer, you can. So if you like this tutorial, please be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe for more future sewing tutorials. And let's get started.
Supplies you'll need if you want to make this project. The exact measurements and yardage will be listed in the pattern. You will need a medium sweatshirt material of your choice. French terry, cotton, or fleece are good recommendations. You will also need one 10-inch closed-end zipper. Mine is super long because I couldn't find one in this color that was smaller, so I have to cut this one down. Some bias binding. You won't need this much though. To make the hemline adjustable, I am going to be using some cording and a double hole cord stopper. Alternatively, you could use some 1-inch elastic if you didn't want it to be adjustable. Speaking of elastic, you will also need a smaller elastic, either 3/8 of an inch or 1/2 inch elastic for the sleeve hem. You will also need a bit of fusible interfacing for the collar pieces. And last but not least, the sewing pattern, which is linked below. I will also give an honorable mention to my walking foot. This project wouldn't have been possible without it, and I highly recommend using one, which I will also have linked down below. Once all your pieces are cut, you will have 2 collar interfacing pieces, 2 collar pieces, 1 pocket piece, 1 back piece. Don't forget to cut the notches. 2 sleeves. Both sleeves and the body of the sweater have adjustment lines added to the pattern. If you'd like to make the pattern longer or shorter, use that line to either add or remove length. The front pattern piece needs to be cut down the center to these notches. This is where the zipper will be. Then add the notches cut at a 45-degree angle. Do this part carefully because I actually somehow cut them to be uneven, so you will see later on I run into problems when installing the zipper. But that's the reality of sewing sometimes. Don't forget the armhole notches and to transfer the pocket notches. For this sweater, I'll be finishing all of my raw edges with my serger, but serging or overlocking is completely optional for this project since typical sweatshirt material doesn't fray. I'm going to do most of the serging as I go, but to start, I need to serge my pocket piece and my 2 collar pieces after I've ironed my fusible interfacing on. First, we are going to start with the pocket. Fold down the curved edges 3/4 of an inch and pin, then sew a top stitch. Now fold down the top 1/2 inch and pin to keep it in place, and do the same thing on both of the sides of the pockets. Then give both of those pinned areas a good press to help them stay folded. To sew the pocket to the center front, match the pocket notches. Make sure the pocket is straight and pin it down. Then sew a top stitch at 3/8 of an inch to the top pocket and both the sides. We'll worry about the bottom when we get to the hem. Now we are going to attach the front and back pieces together, but only at the shoulder seams. Sew at 3/8 of an inch. Then I serged the seam allowance together and top stitched the shoulder seam in place. Next, we are going to attach the collar, starting with the outer collar. I matched up the center back of the bodice with the center back of the collar and pinned all the way around the neckline and sewed them together at 3/8 of an inch. Before I sew in the zipper, I have decided to add in bias tape around the zipper to create a clean looking inside. This step is totally optional. To do this, I am going to start at the bottom edge and wrap the bottom of the zipper with the bias tape and sew. And now I'm going to add the bias tape to either side of the zipper. I found it helpful to use clips as opposed to pins to keep it in place. You also don't need the bias tape all the way up. This is a 10-inch zipper, so I would recommend stopping about 1.5 inches below the top of the zipper to reduce bulk. Then sew the bias tape to both sides of the zipper. Still working with the bias tape, I am also going to line the bottom edge of the inner collar piece with bias tape. This will cover up any messy seams that could be visible from the outside of the collar. Now it's finally time to sew in the zipper, one side at a time. With right sides together, I pin the zipper face down. Once I reach the top where the facing starts, I sandwiched the inner collar on top of the zipper, right side down and pinned. Then sewed along the zippered edge, just outside the bias binding because I don't want to catch any of that to be visible from the outside. Then sewed the zipper right up to the edge of the bottom stopper. Then sew the other side of the zipper to the sweater. When attaching the collar, make sure it's not twisted, then sew the zipper in place. To close up the bottom of the zipper, flip the sweater to the inside and make sure that little triangle we cut earlier is laying flat, pin and sew in place, closing up the bottom edge of the zipper. This is when I realized I had cut the slits unevenly somehow, so it was puckering. I tried to clip it a little more to help it lay flat, but now I had a small hole. But that's just how sewing goes sometimes. I just did a bit of hand stitching to minimize the appearance, and it was good enough for me. Now it was time for me to trim my zipper down. Ideally, you won't need to do this, but I just cut the zipper down and tried to remove some of the coils. I probably should have removed more because it was pretty bulky when sewing, but it turned out okay regardless. Then with the sweater inside out, we are going to sew the top of the collar closed with right sides together at a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance. Clip the corners and turn them right side out. If you do happen to cut your zipper down to size, don't forget to add a zipper stopper so your slider doesn't fall out. You can either sew one by hand like I'm doing, or you can purchase actual zipper stoppers. A trick I like to do with bulky areas is to use my hammer to flatten out the seams a bit. I did this before sewing the top stitching, which I knew would be a challenge over certain seams. To top stitch, I'm going to start at the bottom of the zipper, then up one side of the zipper, around the collar edge, and then back down to the other side of the zipper. I definitely struggled over certain parts of the top stitching, and I wasn't overly happy with it, but that's okay, it could be worse. Then I went in and hand stitched the inner collar to the outer collar along the bias binding. If you are really confident, you could do a stitch in the ditch with the machine and try to catch everything, but I knew I wouldn't do a good job at that, so I just opted for hand stitching to be safe. Okay, it's time to attach the sleeves. Making sure you match up the notches, pin and sew the sleeves to the bodice, right sides together at 3/8 of an inch of seam allowance. To close up the sleeves and the side seam, I am going to fold right sides together, making sure I line up the armhole for a clean look. Then I sewed from the bottom of the sleeve to the hemline. Now we are going to finish the sleeve hem, and I'm going to do that with some 3/8 of an inch elastic. I cut my elastic into two 11-inch pieces. If you want a more fitted sleeve, you can make this smaller. I overlapped the ends of the elastic and used a zigzag stitch to close it. Then I divided the elastic into quarters and did the same thing to my sleeve. With the sleeve inside out, I matched up the notches on the sleeve and the elastic and rolled it down, enough to cover the elastic. I found it most helpful to use clips instead of pins during this process. Then I used a zigzag stitch to secure the elastic into place. Now that my sleeves are done, I can move on to the final step, which is the hem. There are many ways you can finish the hem, but I'm going to use a draw cord in this tutorial. You can either measure around the hemline to see how much draw cord you're going to need, or there is a chart available within the sewing pattern. So ideally, I would have used the buttonhole function on my machine to do this properly, but I was pressed for time. You can choose the placement of where you'd like the cord to end, either in the middle or on either side seam. I chose the right side seam. I slid each end of the cording into the stopper and pulled it all the way to the other end. Then I closed up my draw cord. I am using a scrap piece of muslin to wrap around the ends so I can secure it easier with my machine. With chalk, I drew out a 1-inch line around the hem and used that as a guide to place the cord, and clipped it into place so the cord will not get in the way when sewing. Then I just sewed a straight stitch to complete the hem. I found this easiest to do from the inside out. And now my sweater is done. I had enough fabric to also make a pair of shorts to match, and I just love how this little set turned out. If you want to make your own sweater or pair of shorts, the link to both patterns will be in the description. And please be sure to subscribe to see my latest sewing videos. And I will catch you in the next one. Bye!